Good day, everyone. Today, we are going to discuss the remedial teaching in listening. But before that, let me introduce ourselves first. I am Ivone M. Dumayag and my groupmates are Vida Bataring, Judy May Paz, Jane Dasil, Jasmine Parohenog, Meroslin Ulangka, Kathleen Fronda, Rachel Andujar, Clarissa Sani, Roldan Cabison, Jenaline De La Rosa, Jamar Antonio, Ethel Jane Jose, and Melanie Obispo. Remedial teaching and listening. Remedial teaching aims to improve a skill or ability in each student. It can help struggling learners shore up basic skills. The extra support can help the learners catch up their peers. Listening skill is an ability to actively hear and understand messages in communication process. And it is important to develop this skill because it helps us to gain information. We all know that there are students who are lack in listening skill. Therefore, it is important for us to conduct a remedial instruction in order to help them develop this skill. There are people who hear but they do not know how to listen. And I want you to have an overview or idea that hearing and listening are two different things. And it is that listening that helps us improve life. And today, let us find out how and why they differ. We often thought that everyone who hears listen, which is very wrong. We automatically hear sounds but listening is a decision. Like reading, listening needs comprehension. It requires focus and attention in order for us to grasp the knowledge and information being delivered. So there is a quotation here that says, it is not the hearing that improves life but the listening. So it means that hearing is useless if you grasp no information. We must learn to listen in order for us to obtain knowledge that can help us in improving our life. How is listening differ from hearing? Hearing is just a physical process that allows sounds to enter your ears, while listening involves paying more attention and improving comprehension. So in hearing, we just hear the words, the statements, or the background noises that is being said without understanding the importance of it. While in listening, we give attention to comprehend the messages that is being delivered. Listening is also hearing, but in this category, there is a thoughtful attention being included. Hearing involves the use of only one senses, and that is the auditory, while in listening, it involves the use of more than one senses, which are the visual, auditory, tactile, and many more.
The importance and benefits of listening. Listening develops interpersonal relationships. Listening is often considered a behavioral process where the listener makes a conscious effort to hear and understand the words to respond in a both nonverbal and verbal manner. It can happen when the two individuals meet where one is the speaker and the other listener, or in groups where the majority of people listen to what is said. Listening helps to uncover underlying issues. Listening to a conversation helps in sending a strong message to the person with whom you are interacting. It shows your 100% involvement and your intent to understand and communicate on the given topic. A listener has the ability to influence a person and bring him to his way of thinking without saying a word with the help of nonverbal communication. Listening develops communicating skills. Listening is an important life skill that is considered fundamental to interactions between human beings. If you are looking to become an excellent communicator, then the first thing you should do is to start listening with your ears and eyes open. An excellent communicator is not the one who can put across his thoughts and convince others forcefully, but the one who listens, understands, grasps, and encourage conversation from both ends. Listening helps to gather facts. When someone listens to a conversation, he can collect the information that might have been invisible in other circumstances. The nonverbal communication is as important as the verbal one and helps to absorb facts. Gathering them will keep you in the loop and avoid jumping to unnecessary conclusions. Listening helps to avoid trifling conversation. When two people are bent on speaking, there is less chance of listening. In a conversation, the important facts and information get lost. Most of us tend to be distracted or preoccupied and hence do not pay much attention to the conversation that is happening with us. Listening helps in better understanding. Listening is a deliberate attempt of a person to comprehend the words and the message behind the words. It is an important skill that assists in minimizing the chances of error as the listener is tuned to every nuance of the speaker. He has been paying attention to learn about the hidden meaning. The importance of listening is that it helps in developing a better understanding of the facts, ideas, and thought. Listening helps in conflict resolution. The importance of listening in such circumstances is that it will help in conflict resolution. When the management or the employee of one organization makes an effort to listen to the grievances of the client or customers, then it will open a path for understanding. Listening encourages a better personal life. A person who shows the ability to listen is in high demand as other people automatically gravitate towards him. Conveying with the person who listens to the conversation helps to get a grip on your own words so that the speaker can understand by himself the words and its message and differentiate the right from the wrong. The listener helps to boost confidence and improve the self-esteem of the speaker by giving credence to the spoken words. Listening encourages a better professional life. The process of listening involves putting the onus on the underlying messages, understanding, interpreting, analyzing, evaluating, and then responding effectively. Hearing is what the ears and senses, but listening needs both the ears and mind in sync. The importance of listening is that it helps to gain a better perspective and to reach farther in professional life. It helps to improve the relationship in the workplace so that the productivity and efficiency of the employee as well as the firm increases automatically. Listening puts the speaker at ease. Listening is an important skill where it is imperative that the speaker is not interrupted when he is saying something and the listener can concentrate on the words and underlying messages of the speaker. The listener is always on the best possible seat because he can reflect on the hidden feelings and messages of the conversation and contemplate his next move. The importance of listening is that it removes distractions and puts the speaker at ease. When a listener is patient and empathizes with the speaker, it leads to mutual understanding and respect.
Factors that influence listening proficiency. Effective listening in classroom is about more hearing and working knowledge of language. So students struggle with listening comprehension that struggles them to learn material that is presented orally. So in this, having an awareness of factors that affect their listening comprehension help us to know better the needs of the student. Background knowledge is the amount of information or knowledge someone has in a particular topic. This is acquired by the number of experiences someone has in his life or the amount of knowledge they have retained from listening or reading. So the background knowledge of a student on the subject has an impact on their listening comprehension. The learner with weak listening skill will have a tough time accessing challenging information about proper previous knowledge. Read books, present films, and break down complex vocabulary into words that the student can be understand to be prepared learners for new and difficult materials. Speaking style is a set of properties by which you can link speech to a certain communicative situation. So speaking style is a communicative style that helps comprehend in learning. This includes vocabulary, rhyming sounds, idioms and expressions, pronunciation, regional and national accents, grammar in context, and language rhythm. Vocabulary. As a matter of fact, knowing of plenty vocabulary will contribute to individuals' comprehension of what they read and listen, and it will make important contribution for them to be able to tell what they feel and think both verbally and in writing. So, vocabulary plays a fundamental role in listening process and contributes a greatly listening comprehension. The words we need to know to understand what we hear are referred to as listening vocabulary. The word we use when we speak make up our spoken vocabulary. Rhyming sounds. Rhyming is a helpful first step toward phonemic awareness. So when learners play with rhymes, they listen to the sounds within a word and identify word parts. Rhyme is important to emergent learning because it teaches learners about the language. It helps them to be familiarized about the word, and rhyming also teach learners the sound of the language. Idioms and expressions. An idiom is an expression or phrase whose meaning does not relate to a literal meaning of its word. So every language has common idioms and expressions that help the speaker to communicate of thought to one another more easily and clearly than just explaining things vocally. Knowing many of these as possible beneficial. But if you don't, the meaning of many discussion or spoken exchange may simply lost on the listener. Pronunciation. In the way which our word language is spoken. So everyone speaks in a very unique way and employs various forms of connected speech. On an individual basis, factors like contraction, juncture, accommodation, aspect, intonation, and others affect pronunciation and speech pattern. Listening comprehension can be greatly impacted when learners are unfamiliar with or simply obviously of this factor. Regional and national accent. An accent refers to how people pronounce words, whereas a dialect is all-encompassing. So the same statement can be significantly different when spoken by people with diverse first language background, regional locales, or ethnic origins. Learners' unfamiliarity with such can result in a definite lack of listening comprehension. Grammar in context. This involves making connection between grammatical pattern and the meaning of the text. Learners can be handicapped by comprehending how and particular grammar structures are utilized by native speaker during an oral discourse or verbal exchange when grammar and its components are taught as independent issues that is outside of a relevant context. As a result, when the learner hear a grammar structure they know, but they learn out of the context, they may miss or simply not grasp what they're hearing. Language rhythm. This is an aspect of prosody, others being intonation, stress, and tempo of speech. So rhythm can be a powerful medium of stimulating communication and social interactions. It distinguishes speech from an ordinary speech. It establishes a tone for the speech and can be elicit emotion or strengthen ideas.
Factors affecting a student's listening. These are the internal factor and the external factor. Internal factor refer to the learner's characteristic, language proficiency, memory, age, gender, background knowledge, as well as aptitude, motivation, psychological and physiological factors, which includes problems in language proficiency, prior background knowledge, lack of motivation to listen, psychological factors, and other internal factors. So, basically, internal factors are guided by the aptitude of an individual, that is the physical and emotional condition which affect the listening process. So from the word internal, it is the internal factors that affects the listening skills, including the mind. External factors are mainly related to the type of language input and task and the context in which listening occurs. This includes speed of delivery and different accents of the speakers, the content and task of listening materials, context and context. So, external factors are the subject matters that influence the learning process, like environmental noise and speaking techniques that distract the listeners. There are learners who got distracted with noise and styles. Therefore, we must be aware about our learners so that we are able to make adjustments. So for example, our environment are noisy because of the machines, because of the cars that is passing by. So we must know how to address these problems in order for us to impart knowledge to our learners, in order for our learners to learn from us, in order for them to develop their listening skills. And another one is the speaking techniques. We must know how to control our voice. We must know how to act in front of them. We must know what are the strategies, what are the learning styles that we need so that they are able to listen to us very well.
How do we diagnose listening proficiency? There are ways below on how to diagnose or distinguish the listening proficiency of students. Use multiple choice quizzes. Multiple quizzes encourage learners' self-awareness of progress and self-assess. In this way, we're helping our students to easily recall the answer then to recognize. Number 2, use open-ended why questions. We are going to use why questions in listening proficiency, in which asking question to our listeners to know if they are really listening or if they are understand what we taught to them, and to ensure they are receiving the intended message or messages. Number 3, use the who said what strategy. In this strategy, you'll determine who really is listening to your students. It helps you more evaluate your student. This uniquely powerful in listening proficiency. It is sparse learning wherein you'll know if your student learning. Number 4, true or false type of test. We need to conduct this test to test the knowledge of learners, to reflect on what they've learned, and to enhance school engagement. This quickly test knowledge inspires critical thinking. Number 5, ask students to fill in the blanks. We need this common type of test in class because it encourages learners to apply their knowledge they have already acquired in class. This type of test is consists of praise wherein students provides the missing word. Teachers use this type of test to ensure how learners able to recall the topic. Number 6, have them write an essay. Or ask them about opinion. As we all know, opinion essay is a formal piece of writing. Therefore, learners are required to think deep, thought, and express their own point of view.
Now that you are already aware on how to diagnose the listening proficiency of students, let us now launch on this topic, which is about on how to diagnose retarded and poor listeners. If the previous topic depicts about the proficiency of learners or listeners, retarded and poor listeners, on the other hand, are those who has deficiencies in acquiring the objectives of the certain topic during the learning process. Before we dig deeper on how to diagnose learners with deficiencies, let's define retarded first. Retarded means intellectual disability. Of course, when a student has intellectual disability, it is obvious that he cannot easily cope during the learning process. And one of the ways on how we can diagnose retarded learners is to categorize them whether they are being mild, moderate, or severe. Mild mental retardation is when a learner has deficiencies in understanding or analyzing the use of language. Just like, for example, speech problems, which interferes the normal development of a person, which will serve as a way for him to become dependent until he will enter adult life. Moderate mental retardation is when a learner is having poor social awareness but can learn how to speak and communicate but not fluently. While severe mental retardation are learners who are having behavioral traits like aggression when they became wild, when they are not in mood. Dependence, where they cannot deal with the normal way of living independently, and doing self-injury, and worse, suicide. The last classification of mental retardation is profound. I did not include it on the presentation because it is often we encounter this type of learner which needed a high level of supervision. These are learners having mental age like 4 years old below and are advised to take homeschooling. The various types of mental retardation causes learners to become deficient in listening. As future teachers, someday we cannot choose who will be our students. Whether we like it or not, we will be dealing with diverse kind of learners. If someday we can encounter these types of learners with intellectual disabilities, we can diagnose them by knowing their difficulties with regards to word recognition, reading comprehension, writing strategies, talking, and slow to master things. If these 5 difficulties are evident to a learner, it explicitly proves that he has intellectual disability which makes him a poor listener. The answer beyond on how to empower retarded and poor listeners are transparent by the upcoming topic, which is all about the types of listening strategies.
Innovators and listening difficulties. Today, in our modern world, everybody accepts that listening is one of the most important skills we must have. Learners have significant problems in listening comprehension because of the fact that schools pay more attention to structure, writing, reading, and vocabulary. And most teachers do not attach importance to listening while preparing their lesson plan. It is because a great number of teachers believe that it will develop naturally within the language learning process and they will learn unconsciously. Actually, there are a number of listening barriers based on message, delivery, audience, and environment. So, teaching and drilling listening strategies is students' listening comprehension. So, according to Azmi Bingol, Selig, and Hidgilis of 2014, there are a lot of difficulties that learners may encounter in the listening comprehension processes, and some of these problems are as follows. The first one is the quality of recorded materials, wherein it is in some classes, teachers use some recorded materials that do not have high quality. The quality of sound can impact the comprehending of learners' listening. The second one is the cultural differences wherein the learners should be familiar to the cultural knowledge of language that has a significant effect on the learner's understanding. If the listening tasks involve completely different cultural materials, then the learners may have critical problems in their comprehension. It is the responsibility of the teacher to give background and knowledge about the listening activities in advance. The third one is the accent. According to Munro and Derwing of 1993, they expressed that too many accented speech can lead to an important reduction in comprehension. And also, according to GONE of 1999, 66% of learners mentioned a speaker accent as one of the most significant factors that affect listeners' comprehension. Unfamiliar accents, both native and non-native, can cause serious problems in listening comprehension. And familiarity with an accent help learners' listening comprehension. While back of 2001 indicated that when listeners hear an unfamiliar accent such as Indian language or Indian English for the first time, after studying only American English, will encounter critical difficulties in listening. So this will certainly interrupt the whole listening comprehension process, and at the same time, an unfamiliar accent makes comprehension impossible for the learners.
7 types of listening. The first one is the informational listening. When you want to learn something, you will use this informational listening to understand and retain information. This type of listening entails the goal of comprehending and retaining information. So basically, it is usually observed in teaching and learning context. Like for example, if you are listening to what your teacher is telling you during discussion, of course, the main goal or purpose where you would like to listen is for you to observe and retain information. Since retention and recall are important components of informational listening, good concentration and memory are the main keys. So if you really want to understand what the person or what the teacher is saying you need to listen to them attentively. The second one is the discriminative listening. Discriminative is the first listening type that you're born with, meaning it is developed at a very early stage or it is developed at a very young age. It involves identifying the difference between tones and sound to figure out how these differences may affect the entire meaning of a sentence. Like for example, the tone change from sad to happy, and let's say said I love you to someone. You can say it in a romantic or in a simple way. Another example is that when you say sorry to your parents or partners, they would know if you're sincere or not. If you cannot hear differences, then you cannot make sense of the meaning that is expressed by such differences. Discriminative listening also enables us to pick up on verbal cues that indicates what the speaker is truly saying or what emotion they are trying to express. Like I've said a while back that when you say sorry to your parents or partners, then they would know if you're really sincere or not. The third one is the biased listening. Biased listening is also known as selective listening. It is a type of listening behavior that demonstrated when someone is just listening for information that they want to hear. This listening process can lead to distortion of fact because the person isn't fully listening to what the speaker wishes to communicate, typically misinterpreting what the speaker wants to say, and sometimes we are doing this subconsciously without even realizing it. Next is sympathetic listening. This type of listening is a self-explanatory, but it is a very important form of listening. Sympathetic listening is driven by emotions and feelings. We are not focusing on our feelings, but rather focusing on the speaker's feeling and emotion. Here are some tips in sympathetic listening. The first one is be non-judgmental. Second one is give your attention to the speaker and listen carefully. So these tips of sympathetic listening is our own way of showing that we understand the speaker's feeling and show that we care about them. In other words, there is a sharing of feelings, or there is a connection between the two of you. This is common among our close friends, family, and partners. Like for example, when you saw your friend crying and you accompanied her
to ease their pain or sadness.
10 characteristics of poor listening. First, interrupt the speaker. Interrupting the speaker seems that you are not really listening and you are just waiting for your moment to interject. Have wandering mind and gaze. For example, mind wandering in a class means you miss out what is being taught. Don't give eye contact. Breaking eye contact while listening can be a sign that the person no longer feels connected to you. Show no enthusiasm or interest in the speaker. Isn't it that enthusiasm is an essential element in any successful speaker's delivery? Use negative body language, facial expressions, and verbal signals. To conclusion, meaning you are being thoughtless and precipitate. Don't check understanding, meaning you're not really learning what is being taught. Finishing other people's sentences, because finishing other people's sentences often makes impatience. Don't respond, meaning they are not really listening to what is being taught, that's why they are not responding. And lastly, change the subject. Listeners sometimes change the subject to avoid embarrassment.
Give unwanted advice. Giving unwanted advice can contribute to the relationship problem. It's disrespectful and presumptive to insert your opinions and ideas when they not be wanted. Giving unwanted advice can be frustrating experience for the speaker. Don't give feedback. Poor listener don't give feedback to the speaker because they not paying attention. Are easily distracted. Poor listeners are easily distracted and may even create disturbance that interfere with their own listening efficiency. They talk with their neighbors and they make a little or no effort to conceal their boredom. Don't ask questions. They don't ask questions because they didn't understand the topic and they not listening to the speaker. Take too much note does not missing the point. Poor listeners tend to write things down without understanding the actual point. It becomes messier when they got ourselves too busy in jotting things down from presentation without listening to the speaker. Fidget and don't pay attention to the speaker. Poor listeners are fidget and don't pay attention because they are low in concentration and not paying close attention to the speaker. Talk too much. People like to share what they know and curate a certain image from others. A lot of time, people don't listen well because they are focused on what their response should be. Appear preoccupied. They are thinking a lot, they thinking something or someone aided and they hardly notice other things.
Causes of listening problem.
Lack of awareness. Lack of awareness. When you take self-awareness, you fail to identify what you're feeling and how it manifests itself in your daily actions. You fail to see the patterns in your behaviors and thinking. As a result, you tend to experience more negative emotion because you don't know how to better align your choices with what you want. Listening is hard work. Listening is harder because it actually requires you to pay attention to the speakers. Listening is receiving language through ears, and listening involves identifying the sounds of speech and processing them into words and sentences. Listening is any language requires focus and attention. It is a skill that some people need to work at harder than others. Lack of interest. So, lack of interest, if you have interest in something, you want to have learned or hear more about it. So, lack is noun singular or uncount, a situation in which you do not have any or do not have enough of something you need. Lack of vocabulary. Lack of vocabulary would be a total shortage and more important that inordinate use of shortcuts such as you know or the movie Marty. You ain't a dog. Short would indicate that there is a limitations in many areas of speech or writing. Bad listening habits. Bad listening habits often people who are not actually listening and thinking about something else deliberately try to look as though they were listening. So, sometimes a person concentrates on how someone says some things that he pays little attention to what to or she is actually saying.
Low concentration. Low concentration or not paying attention to the speaker is detrimental to effective listening. It can result from various psychological or physical situations such as visual or auditory distractions, physical discomfort, inadequate volume, lack of interest in the subject material, stress, or personal bias. Regardless of the cause, when a listener is not paying attention to the speaker's dialogue, effective communication is significantly diminished. So both listeners and the speakers should be aware of this kind of impediments and work to eliminate or mitigate them. Number 2, lack of prioritization. Just as lack of attention to detail in a conversation can lead to ineffective listening. So focusing too much attention on the least important information, listeners need to be able to pick up on social cues and prioritize the information they hear to identify the most important point within the context of the conversation. Next is the poor judgment. When listening to a speaker's message, it is common to sometimes overlook aspects of the conversation or make judgment before all of the information is presented. Listeners often engage in confirmation bias, which is the tendency to isolate aspects of conversation to support one's own pre-existing belief and values. The psychological process has a detrimental effect on listening for several reasons. The last one is focusing on style, not substance. The vividness effect explains how vivid or highly graphic an individual's perception of a situation. When observing an event in person, an observer automatically drawn toward the sensational, vivid, or memorable aspects of a conversation or speech.
The 8 key to listening skills. Number 1, recognizing literal meaning. A listener tends to recognize literal meaning that are found and used in the story being listened. Meaning, the words are defined according to how it is used and being delivered. In addition, recognizing literal meaning is based on how you perceive or understand the word. Number 2, understanding vocabularies. Like in the first key to listening skills, hard to understand words in the story will be given meaning through the use of context clues. It is a method wherein the words used will be understood according on how it is being delivered and used. Number 3, making inferences. Through listening attentively, students would be able to give their opinions on the story they have listened. An effective listener tends to be more active in making inferences because he or she comprehends the story scenarios very well. Number 4, identifying main ideas. So through asking the students to identify the main point of the story, you will be able to determine who listened well and who listened less. So, in order to become a good listener, we should be attentive in order to understand the story well and learn from it.
When we say determining purpose, these are questions that is asked to students to determine the purpose of an audio story. From these, students have a knowledge to determine the purpose of an audio story. Analyzing reasoning. So these are questions that would be asked to students for them to analyze reasoning supporting in a claim in an audio story. From this, they can defend their answers through reasoning for them to prove something about the topic that is being discussed or questions that is being asked by a teacher to them. Drawing conclusion. These are questions asking students to draw conclusions by synthesizing information in an audio story. An example of this is a reflection paper. Most of the time, teacher gave reflection paper to students for them to check if the students really understand the topic that is being discussed inside the classroom. These are one way for them to check what students learn about the topic that is being discussed. Finding evidence. These are questions asking to students to identify statements or details in an audio story that provide evidence to support claims or conclusion. For example, they watch a movie, then teachers let them make a reaction paper or a reflection paper.
We also provided ways on how to improve students' listening comprehension. First one is to teach pronunciation, stress, and intonation of the critical sounds in English. So, we must teach them on how to pronounce a word, accents, or anything related to phonology. Because when we teach them sounds, they will listen because they want to learn sounds. They are able to apply it in real life situation and in their future careers. Next one is practice sound discrimination, liaisons, and incomplete plosives. So, we must also teach them on how to distinguish sounds like horns of different vehicles, sounds of animals, and etc. Third is recognize stressed and unstressed words. Fourth, enrich vocabulary. We must expand the vocabulary of our students through the use of flashcards and mnemonics. We can also suggest to them to visit the dictionary and thesaurus. Fifth, teach grammar. We must teach them on how to use grammar accurately. So we all know that we are all fluent in English speaking, but some of us do not know how to use it accurately. We must always remember that it is important to be accurate than to be fluent. Next one is practice inferring information not directly stated. Improve skills in predicting, and lastly, take note-taking skills.
In remedial teaching in listening, it gives us ample and explicit understanding about the importance and benefits of listening. Factors that influence listening in proficiency, factors affecting students' listening comprehension, how to diagnose the listening proficiency, and retarded and poor listener, which are learners with deficiencies. Innovators and listening difficulties, types of listening strategies, characteristics of poor listeners, causes of listening problem, listening comprehension skills, and lastly is how to improve students' listening comprehension. Always bear in mind that to learn is to always listen.